Really, I don't know how it happened. While I didn't want this to happen to me, I didn't even wait for this traumatizing moment. To this day there are no answers for me to describe what happened that night. I really do not know. But still, I kept this story in my mind for many people. Only a few friends of mine had access to this whole story. Really, it makes me confused. Now, I will tell you everything that happened to me that certain day and other events afterwards. I had just left a funeral of a relative of a friend of mine from college. Me and 3 of my friends who attended the funeral decided to have dinner in Paris city center. Before you ask me, yes, I live in France, to cheer us up a little, as my friend was very depressed about the recent death of his loved one. As soon as we finished eating our pizza, I said goodbye to my friends and went to the region where my house was by train. As I lived a little far from the city center, maybe I was the only person who studied at the college who lived in this region of Paris. My home was a 5-minute walk from the local train station, which made it so much easier for me. As soon as I arrived at the gate, I noticed that in front of the main door of my house, there was a small package lying there. It was something very simple and recent. It felt like someone had delivered it earlier that day. But I was surprised, because the postman appeared in my neighborhood every 3 weeks and the last time he appeared there was almost a week ago. I even asked some neighbors if they saw someone or the post office delivering some package in front of my house, but I didn't get any answer, because they also thought nothing much had happened, since my post office was normal. Seeing that this was all a dead end for my answers, I decided to go to my house to see what it was. As soon as I entered the house and fed my cat some food, I opened the package and saw that there was a DVD inside. It was a DVD that didn't have a label or something. It was those common DVDs that you normally store or delete files or videos whenever you want and that can be easily purchased. I didn't understand much at that very moment, who had left that DVD in my house so suddenly. Why does this seem so important? I went to analyze that DVD a little more and saw that something was written with a green pen on the top of the DVD. The ink was very smudged, making me not recognize anything. I had to get my cell phone to light up on that blur. I realized there was something written in that place, and it was written, Kanbaru's Madness. At first, I didn't quite understand what this could say. I thought at first that it might be a game in development and someone accidentally dropped it in front of my house, but the hypothesis was discarded as soon as I put that DVD in my computer. In the DVD file I saw only 5 things, 3 folders named Test, Run and Script, a photo, and a video. In the first 2 folders Test and Run showed absolutely nothing, practically no files to show. In the script folder, there was only a notepad with the name Henry, which showed only something written like "Why you are so lost," in the notes. Seeing that I had found absolutely no shit in the first 3 files, I went to the photo archive, which showed a photo of a train wrecked along with some police officers investigating what had happened. Now that I saw that this was too weird, I wanted to ask myself what the context of it all was, but I decided to continue. So, I got to the part of the .mp4 file, the video. The video had the same name in which he had seen it scrawled on the DVD, in this case, Kanbaru Madness. But, when I put the video to play on my PC player, it ended up giving an error. I was already very angry because that didn't work. I tried it twice more but to no avail. So I took the DVD out of my PC and put it in my DVD player to be able to play the video file on my TV. At first I thought it couldn't work, but I saw that I was wrong. It finally started playing a video. Next, I was surprised to see that this was an episode of the anime Bakemonogatari. I mean, it clearly managed to surprise me. How did a DVD of this anime end up at my house like that? I remember that all my friends who liked anime in my college, only 2 considered Bakemonogatari as their favorite anime. I thought it was a surprise they made me, but that didn't matter to me. I even thought about calling them to let them know about what I had found in front of my house, but I gave up right away. I liked Monogatari a lot, especially the first season of the anime, which was Bakemonogatari, but at the same time I don't consider it one of my favorite animes. There were some better ones, but you'll see why. That was released a short time ago at the time of the event. So, they had just released the new season, in this case, Bakemonogatari. But because of my college and of course my worst possible job at a local pizzeria, I ended up not seeing many new animes or new seasons in 2012, including Bakemonogatari. As I was already a week on summer vacation from my college and at the same time, from my job, I had already started to see several animes that had been released at that time, but I hadn't started the new season of Monogatari, including by several events that took place that day. Well, in advance, as soon as the opening stable ended, the screen went black for almost a minute. Although I was surprised that the screen was black for all this time, because normally, the screen used to jump directly to the episode after the opening ended. I may have worried needlessly, but that wasn't common at all. Anyway, the sounds seemed to be small hisses during that 1 minute of dark screen. I couldn't understand what it was, but I think it must have been some error on the DVD or something. As soon as the black screen ended, it all started at Araragi's residence. There was absolutely no one around. The camera focused on a room with virtually no characters in sight. No sound was played at that point in the scene. It was like the screen was locked or something. I even went to check it out, but oddly enough, it was working despite everything. I was surprised by the fact that it didn't introduce me anything else. I swore I didn't understand what it was for. The screen stayed like this for about 2.5 minutes, until finally the episode starts. The scene then cuts to Hanekawa, who appeared to be walking on what appeared to be a dark street at night. She appeared to be walking calmly during that moment. But, I saw something wrong with her. She looked very scared, like she didn't want to be walking down that street. It was like she was being forced to do that by force. Her face was terrified, as if she was seeing something that had scared her on that street. She continued walking for a few seconds until she stopped, at which point, the screen moves away from Hanekawa, while gradually darkening. She hadn't understood anything at the time, including the context of that scene. There were some small murmurs from Hanekawa at that moment when the screen went dark, as was to be expected. I didn't understand anything at all. They were quite unrecognizable words. I believe those murmurs were not in Japanese, perhaps in another language. Somehow, after almost a minute, the murmurs stopped and no more sounds were played. After almost 10 seconds of black screen, those words that blinked in Japanese, which are quite normal in anime and appeared more often, appeared for 3 seconds. Then shows a dialogue between Araragi and Hakakuji. Nothing was out of the ordinary at that time. That classical piano music that always played in the background appeared as expected. They were both talking about a possible meeting with Shinobu a little later that day. The dialogue followed pretty much normal for an episode of Monogatari, which was pretty much normal. But what bothered me in a way was that little by little, the conversation started to take a much darker and more disturbing turn. I don't know why, but it bothered me a lot with what they were talking about right at the end of the scene. After a dialogue about the possible death of an unidentified character, in which I couldn't understand who had died in the anime because the dubbing audio had too many flaws, Hakakuji stares at Araragi for a few seconds. Then when she stops staring at him, she says something like, "You could have stopped it, couldn't you?" As the audio was very muffled in that scene, I didn't understand exactly what Hakakuji meant and what she meant about Araragi not having prevented something from happening, but I just know they were talking about the death of some character who I couldn't identify it due to a few small sections that weren't clearly muffled. Another point that bothered me was the animation, which seemed to have been done in a hurry, not that it had been done in Paint or some computer program, but yes, it was the original animation, but it seemed very late. The quality of the episode was horrible compared to the other episodes of Monogatari. Literally almost everything in the episode looked very blurry and unrecognizable. As for the dubbing, some dialogues didn't fit the characters. I swore it wasn't done in some dubbing studio, because it was very amateur. It looked like something badly edited done on a computer audio recorder. Both things didn't seem to make sense in my mind. I felt that it might be a good idea to keep watching the episode. I don't know why, but I felt some curiosity run through my mind. Meanwhile, the scene cuts to Araragi and Hakakyuji walking down a street in the middle of town. The setting suggests being a sunny day. This time, the two seemed calmer and much less agitated compared to that previous scene. It was as if nothing was happening. They talked about what they saw in the street ahead and apologized for some things that didn't seem to have any context. Everything seemed disjointed in this episode, including some events that never happened in Monogatari were mentioned by the two characters. After a minute and a half of walking, they arrive at Araragi's residence. After entering, the screen cuts to black, then showing that typical random flash that shows some message in Japanese in the anime. The scene then shows Hakakyuji sitting on a chair. She seems to be alone in the middle of a dark background. There is no background music being played at this time. What intrigued me most was the fact that she was looking terrified and depressed, which meant she was upset or very sad. You can't tell where she was, as there was only a dim light illuminating the place and the floor was all gray. Hakakyuji says something as she looks at the ground, but no sound is heard. This all went on for almost a minute, until the screen started to flash randomly between yellow and red. From here, things started to take a more bizarre and too grotesque turn. At that midpoint, as soon as the screen was blinking, the sounds returned. But, all I heard was just a hiss. It was like the screen was in static, but it was very low. I thought I turned the volume on the TV too high, but I saw that everything was fine. You couldn't tell what was happening. All this went on for almost half a minute, until an image appeared on the screen. It was a picture of a wrecked train. It was overturned and turned right, over what looked like an intersection between a highway and a train track. There was a wrecked car 2 meters from the train and some police investigating it all. As the photo was shown, the hissing sound stopped. At this point, I was already a little confused. How was this all shown for no apparent reason? Something in my mind wanted me to keep seeing it. With no other choices, I decided this was right. After nearly 20 seconds of that photo being shown, a distorted scream mixed with a hissing noise was heard, just as the screen changed to a photo of Hakakyuji screaming in despair. The scene's zoom was totally focused on Hakakyuji's face. For some reason, I couldn't see what else was in that scene, looking something like censorship or some cut from another episode. I jumped in fright at the sound a little loud from that scene. I confess that I didn't expect this. Hakakyuji's face showed more dread than before. The impression it gave was that the more I looked at her, the more scared she was. I already wanted to understand if this was a normal episode of Monogatari or not. I was starting to get really uncomfortable with it. After about 20 more seconds of showing that, the screen switched to a dialogue between Shinobu and Araragi. Shinobu looked very angry with Araragi and they argued non-stop. They seemed to be very angry that Hakakyuji might disappear and they kept blaming each other. I don't know why, but I found the situation of the fight between the two a little funny. I felt a sense of mischief go through me as I gave my TV screen an apprehensive look along with a sadistic smile. All of that stopped when Araragi's home phone suddenly rings. Just as he hung up, a morbid look from Araragi surfaced. He kept looking at Shinobu for no reason, while she wondered why he was this way. After about 10 seconds, Araragi knelt down in front of Shinobu and started to cry. He babbled things he didn't even understand. Shinobu didn't express any reaction until then. It was like she was deeply angry with him or something. Something really wasn't right. I've seen a lot of characters in this anime crying or screaming in a ridiculous way for the voice actor to pretend to be crying. This time it was very different. Araragi seemed to cry and scream at the same time in no other way I'd known before. His screams and cries weren't like the voice actor was pretending he was doing it, but it was like he was desperate and helpless. The way he screamed and cried kind of scared me. What really upset me was that he was screaming and crying at a louder volume than I thought the TV speakers were. They were too low, but I quickly declined a little. And again, I had a weird feeling about it and a little bit of fear, but I tried to get rid of it. So, my mood was short. While all of this was going on, after zooming in on Araragi's crying face, the scene cuts to Shinobu. But this time, she was laughing, like she was finding it very funny. What bothered me was her laugh. It was very different, something wasn't right about it. Her laugh was more sadistic and insane than before. It was as if he was looking into the soul beyond Araragi himself. Her morbid face was filled with disbelief, anger, depression, anger, and outright hatred. I've never seen such a powerful emotion in an anime character, let alone many at the same time. This disturbing scene continued for almost a minute, until the screen cut to an image and the sound suddenly stopped. This image showed Shinobu with the same expression, but this time, she seemed to be looking at the viewer. Something was written in one corner of that image, which said, "I fooled that idiot Araragi," which I found funny, but more frightening because of the situation I found myself in. I don't know why, but after I paid more attention to that image, it gave me an eerie feeling. The screen went black after 1 minute showing that image. So far, I was feeling pretty scared. I was surprised enough to see how far that episode has gone. During a long black screen, I went into the kitchen and got a glass of water so I could calm down. It actually worked, but not for long. As soon as I got back, the screen changed to another scene. The scene goes back to Araragi's residence. There was nothing left. Everything looked like it was burned and there was ash everywhere. Many windows looked like they had been broken, looking like there was a fire. I looked at the place where Araragi and Shinobu were and I didn't find anything. I tried to keep an eye out to see if there was any character, but nothing at all, absolutely nothing. However, I saw a painting on the wall that I couldn't remember if it was already in Araragi's residence. I saw what appeared to be an image of Rainy Devil. It was portraying him in a dark shadow, which appeared to be staring at someone who didn't appear in that painting. For those who don't know, Rainy Devil is a demonic rarity that grants 3 subconscious wishes of its user in exchange for its soul. This entity is sometimes associated with the character Tsurugi Kanbaru. Then came a scene from episode 8 of Bakemonogatari, which shows a dialogue between Araragi and Mime Ashino. But this time, after closing the door, instead of appearing a fight between Araragi and Rainy Devil, the scene cut to a black screen. I didn't understand, why the hell did that scene suddenly change like that? Is this some kind of censorship or failure of the DVD itself? These questions stayed in my mind for some 10 seconds until I realized the fate of that scene. The screen cut to Araragi. The camera was totally focused on his face, but he was in a miserable situation. He was screaming at impressive volumes, not like in the dialogue scene with Shinobu. He looked like he was being tortured by someone and he was begging for to stop. It was like they were recording the voice of someone being really tortured. It wasn't any kind of acting. It needed to be much more than a voice actor to do something like that. And again, the volume got way too loud than it should have been, so much so that I got scared and covered my ears as Araragi's screams got worse. After almost 30 seconds, Araragi vomited blood from his mouth. It wasn't anime blood or anything like that. It was very real blood. It looked like it was done in CGI or Photoshop. As soon as Araragi vomited, the scream stopped and the screen went dark. I was really wondering what the fuck I was seeing. It's not possible for something like that in an anime like Monogatari. I know the anime reaches a point of violence in some scenes in the franchise, but not to the point of this. This was an aberration. It seemed a lot more than I imagined, something scary and bizarre at the same time. I tried to get up from the couch to get this crap DVD player out of my player, but some sick curiosity came to my mind to keep watching. So, I kept seeing that. After almost 5 seconds of a black screen, a scene of Araragi appeared, or rather, what was left of him. He was completely deformed, a portion of his face was disfigured, his hands and feet were ripped from his body. But what intrigued me a lot, was that that kind of scene shouldn't have been done in any anime studio like Shaft, but yes, you had to be really professional to do that. It was something scary. Suddenly, just as the screen went dark, a message appeared saying this curse will never end. And Rainy Devil's background music played. I remember the song was kind of macabre, but it caught me so unexpectedly and by surprise that I got up from my couch. I forgot it was so high. The biggest shiver of all time turned into a spasm of panic and fear. I was so scared I couldn't move or respond, but I watched for 5 consecutive seconds as soon as that was shown. I was feeling weird. I had never felt this feeling in my entire life. Of course, luckily for me, the screen went dark and the background music stopped. Anyway, I was partially relieved, but I didn't expect what I saw next. The screen cut to Shinobu. She expressed a look of dread on her face, who was looking at Araragi's residence. She mumbled some things I rarely understood, but in a slightly low, whimpering voice. It sounded like she was about to cry. After a few minutes, when Shinobu walked out of Araragi's area of residence, the screen went dark as if nothing had happened. And again, the same thing happened, except the message said there will be no forgiveness. The spine-chilling Rainy Devil's tense background music played through my TV speakers again. I don't know, this time I had the speakers down almost all the way. The only thing that could have made it quieter would be if I hushed up and turned off the TV or pulled out that DVD. The screen cuts to Shinobu, but something was very wrong. She was hanged, a noose was over her neck plus some bruises all over her body. I was getting scared enough seeing all of that already. Why the hell would this episode show me something like this? But from my peripheral vision, I saw Kanbaru's face to Shinobu's right. It looked like his mouth was open in a very devilish way, and besides, he was looking at the viewer. The background music was getting more and more distorted as soon as that was shown. I mean, you only noticed that the music was getting distorted 10 seconds after it started. That gave me another strange feeling of discomfort. Once again, my fear turned to despair of what could be coming from seeing that episode. Trust me, you would have to be there to see it, or you could be scared that something might happen to you after it happened. It's one of the worst possible sensations I've had in my entire life. I was thinking about who could have done this. Why would they do this? It's not like they can see my reaction to take any pleasure out of it. So why do this? But what the hell was this looking at? After that image was shown, a scene appeared where Hakakuji and Hanekawa were screaming and running from something non-stop. They looked so desperate and screaming all the time. I was already expecting the worst to happen. Then, when the figure managed to reach both of them, the screen went dark once more. Right after that, while the screen was still dark, I heard Hakakuji and Hanekawa's screams for almost 5 seconds. But this time, the screams were at a medium volume, not the same as the other times, so much so that my TV volume was more or less like this. As I said, I already expected the worst of this scene, but I didn't think it wouldn't scare me so much compared to last time. The screen shifted to the piled bodies of Hakakuji and Hanekawa's corpses. The camera angle just showed that there was nothing else but that. They were in the same way that Araragi's corpse was shown, completely deformed and almost unrecognizable. I could no longer stand to see those scenes. That strange feeling that came to my mind only got worse with each passing minute of the episode. There were even moments when I almost vomited seeing all this. Now came the worst and scariest moment of my entire life. No other moment haunts me like this one until today. In all honesty, maybe I will never get over this traumatizing moment. When the scene changed, it wasn't Rainy Devil's background music playing. It was a distorted violin song being played on my TV. I've never heard that song at some point from Monogatari. There it was too, a message. There was Kanbaru's face visible at the bottom of the message, which seemed to have an even scarier smile and appeared to have a devilish expression. When I read the message, I got more and more scared and feeling the chills non-stop. It was like I was about to pass out at that moment. The message read, "Why are you still awake? It's too late, you will see the final destination. After that, that terrifying image of Kanbaru disappeared from the scene and the word final fate blinked for almost a minute. Once all that was over, another scene had just started. The screen cuts to Senjagahara. She was walking on a dark place with a grey floor. I couldn't recognize where she was, but those are the only descriptions about that I may have seen from that location. She said things I didn't understand, but at a low volume. I noticed something strange about her. The more she walked, slowly, her face wore an increasingly sad and dreadful look. It got to the point where, 2 minutes after the scene started, Senjagahara sits on the floor, hugs herself on her knees and starts crying very softly. What bothered me a little was that she always had a serious look on her face originally, but not this time. She seemed more upset about the whole situation. Suddenly, I saw something approaching in the upper right corner behind Senjagahara. It was Kanbaru, and again, with that devilish look from before, but much worse than I had imagined. She actually looked like a psychopath, or even something much worse.